Perhaps as we continue to take a look at the week ahead, to tell us a little bit more on what we can expect on an international desk for the coming week, we're going to be joined here in studio by SABC News international editor Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, a very good afternoon. We're seeing geopolitics really coming to the fore. You've got, the G7 meeting, obviously in relation to Iran and the Israel conflict that's happening there, but perhaps also the Russia-Ukraine conflict. There's also the progress from President Cyril Ramaphosa himself, who is in attendance there with regards to the G20 summit at large. But also the trade wars, Trump's relationship to Benjamin Netanyahu. There's so much to unpack. What should we be looking out for in relation to these dynamics?
I think you're correct. This is quite an important G7 meeting. When you look at what has been happening around the world, you're talking about the current conflict between Iran and Israel. I think it is going to now divert the attention, and people will be focused on what to do in terms of ensuring that this doesn't continue, because we know that this is going to cause a lot of sufferings, particularly for people in the Middle East, but also around the world. We saw how the oil price went up, and we know that that speaks to food prices might also go up, and also that tension in terms of supply chain, because this is the Middle East, quite a very, very busy region, and the Gulf region, and therefore they will touch on that. The issue of the war in Ukraine, we know that has been attempts to ensure that that war is brought to an end. The Middle East question, the Palestinian question, but the issues of generally the global peace, but also development and the issues of climate change will dominate the talks. On the issue of climate change, I think it's going to be a very difficult discussion, as we know the position of the United States of America as it relates to climate change. You know, the commitments that were made by the G7 member countries in the previous meetings, where they committed billions and billions of rands to help developing nations and countries that are affected by climate change, South Africa being one. But unfortunately, the US has since decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement. And you can imagine President Trump is going to steal the limelight with all the controversial position that America has taken, including the issues of trade and investment veering off the road as it relates to the World Trade Organization policies and programs and agreements. And therefore, it is quite an important one. The president arriving in Canada, quite an important one. South Africa is the presidency of the G20. You want to have synergy between the G7 member countries because they are part of the G20 in terms of the theme of the G20. And I think that will be the focus of the president. And on issues of climate change, as I pointed out previously, those agreements that were not honored, I think the president will again emphasize on a need to honor the commitments by these developed countries.
Well, positions on global conflicts certainly taking center stage. Even just looking at the rising BRICS nations in relation to allegiances and alliances within the G7 itself. What can we ascertain from that as well?
Well, I think members of the BRICS have a particular focus in terms of development. And it's not replacing the G7 or the G20. It is one group that has decided that it will handle issues in a different manner. And therefore, I can't see G7 discussing BRICS. BRICS is an independent group. We are going to see a meeting of the BRICS nations later this month in Brazil, and that's where the agenda of BRICS will be outlined by the host, Brazil. And I think Brazil being a member of the G20, there will always be synergy in terms of ensuring that you work together. And the G7 members are also members of the G20. So you'll always look at issues that bring all these countries together. And therefore, the common position will always dominate. Where countries differ, where groups differ, you will always find a way how to handle that. But this G7 will be mainly focused on issues that are related to development, to climate change, to partnerships. And I think it's quite important to realize that South Africa being invited, this puts South Africa in a better position to lobby at international level, particularly these developed and industrialized nations.
Debt relief, climate change funding, just global conflicts and tensions coming to the fore there. Thank you, Sophie, for your time at this hour and for unpacking that diary. Of course, as it stands here on the international front, Sophie Mokoena is SABC News international editor, weighing in on some of those dynamics unfold.